This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Habayim, Good Kvittel. Welcome everybody. This is a little bit of a different Hoshana Rabba than usual. Usually we're in the Sukkah, we have a nice Suda, and today it's like in Mitzrayim when the Kayach HaDibur was in Golos, the Peh was in Golos, but we hope the Rebbe Shem will send us a Yeshua. So I want to speak out one or two interesting inyanim, new points regarding Hoshana Rabbah. Just by way of introduction, the Bnei Saschar perhaps famously says, why is today called Hoshana Rabbah? Hoshana. Hoshana, Nun Aleph. Nun Aleph is 51. And the Bnei Saschar famously says, and perhaps many are familiar, that the Kavana is Hosha Nun Aleph, that the Rebbe Shem should be Makabel our Tzaka for 51 days. The last 51 days we've been davening, we've been Meschanein, Mevakesh, we have many supplications, many requests, many tefillos, beginning Rosh Chodesh Elul, and throughout the Yemei HaSlichos, and Yom Noraim, and Asar Simei Tshuva. Everybody has different tzrachim, Merubim Tzarchei Amenu, and we've been crying out basically for 51 days. So the Kavanah is Hoshana, save us, be Mekabel our Tzaka on the 51 days from Rosh Chodesh Elul until today. And also, Hoshana, save us today, as today, the 51st day, has a special kayach of Tzaka and Bakasha, which is the Gemar HaChasima. In fact, the Ben Ish Chai writes that a stronger remez is Na ein Na ela lashon bakasha. The word Na itself is a lashon of supplication and request and asking of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So now we come to a very interesting point, because as we know, the Shalosh Regalim are corresponding to the Shalosh Avos. As the Torah brings in the name of his brother, that Pesach is Keneged Avraham, that Avraham Avinu El Habakar Rotz Avraham, that Avraham Avinu served the Archim on Pesach, and Shavuos is Keneged Yitzchak Avinu, that the Ayel of Matan Torah was from the Shofar Matan Torah is from the Ayel of Yitzchak, and Yaakov is Keneged Sukkos. However, there is a special connection between Hoshana Rabbah and specifically Avraham Avinu. Hoshana Rabbah is connected to Avraham Avinu, and this is brought out by the Matei Moshe. The Matei Moshe is a Talmud Muvak of the Maharshal. And the Matei Moshe writes in number 3, Yom Shvi Hu Hoshana Rabbah. The 7th day is Hoshana Rabbah. V'loma nikra Shmai Hoshana Rabbah. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Avraham. God says to Abraham, Ani Yachid v'ata Yachid. I'm one and you're one. I'm unique and you're unique. We both have this quality. Etein lebanecha yoim hamyuchad lechaper by avaynosim. I'm going to give my children a special day to atone for their sins. So the Rebbe Shem says, I'm unique, you're unique, so I'm going to give Klal Yisrael a unique day. What day is that? Hoshana Rabbah. Because my name is Ekia, Aleph Hey, and then Yud Hey, which is 21, corresponding to the 21st day of Tishrei. And you, Avraham, you're the 21st generation. 10 doiros from Adam till Noach, 10 until Avraham. Avraham then is 21. And therefore, I'm 21, you're 21, I'm going to give you the 21st day. So there's something in common between Ribbon Shalom, Avraham, and Hoshana Rabbah. They're all 21. Ekia. In fact, the Arizal says, we say in the B'chol Ma'aminim, Shehu Dayan Emes, Hehagoi Be'ekya Asher Ekya. Ekya is 21, Aleph Hey Yod Hey is 21. 21 times 21 is, what? 441. MS. That's what Arizal says. B'chol Ma'aminim Shehu Dayan Emes, everyone believes that God is true, Hehagoi be'eya asher eya. Okay, so the Rebbe Shem is 21, his name is Ekia, Avram is the 21st generation, and Hoshana Rabbah is the 21st day of the year. In fact, the Megala Amukos says, if you look at number 12, actually I missed the time that I was able to, leave the Dalet Amos a little bit, but I was zeicha to be in Krakow. When was it? Krakow was 2 summers ago, and in the Ramos cemetery, we were there first thing in the morning, so we were the first ones to open up, and it was Yud Gimel Av, and I come to the kavra of the Megala Mukais, and it was his yahrzeit. It was amazing. And Taka, my wife's family, comes from Megala Mukais. So I remember being there Yud Gimel Av about 1.5 years ago. Megala Mukais, it says on his kever, he had Gilui Eliyahu Panim B'Fanim. Okay, they don't say about that about everybody. So the Megala Mukais in his 103rd pshad on Parshas V'Aschanan, he on the beginning of Aschanan, he says, even though the regalim are Keneged, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but we have 3 great days of tshuva. We have Rosh Hoshana, we have Yom Kippur, and we have Hoshana Rabba. Rosh Hoshana is Keneged Yitzchak, because Yitzchak was born on Rosh Hoshana. Yom Kippur is Keneged Yaakov, because Yom Kippur is Hayoim HaGadol VaHanoira, and Yaakov Avinu was the one who said, Man Noira Amakam Hazeh. And Hoshana Rabba is Keneged Avraham Avinu, like the Medrash says, that Avraham is the 21st generation, and Hoshana Rabba is the 21st day of the month. In fact, when Avraham Avinu said, Behar Hashem Yera'eh, Behar is Rashi Tevois, Hoshana Rabba says Megala Mukais. So we see there's a special connection between Hoshana Rabba and Avraham Avinu. What exactly is it? We've already we had 3 shiurim today on the connection between David HaMelech, the Ushpiz of Hoshana Rabba, and Hoshana Rabba. But Avraham Avinu, why should Avraham Avinu be particularly connected to Hoshana Rabba? What's the connection between Avraham and Hoshana Rabba? So let's explore that a little bit. Number 4, the Gemara in Chagiga tells us that there are 7 heavens. Reish Lakish Amar, Reish Lakish says, Shiva, there are 7 heavens. You ready? Ve'elohein. Heaven number 1, Vilain, is a window. Heaven number 2, Rakia. Heaven number 3, Shechakim. Uvegavasai Shechakim. Right? Shechakim is the 3rd heaven. Zavul is the 4th heaven. Ma'ain is number 5. Machain is number 6. Aravais is number 7. The 7th heaven is Aravais. That's the name of the heaven. So is there a connection then between the Arava and Hoshana Rabba, which is the Yom HaArava, and the 7th heaven? And in fact, Rabbeinu B'chai says there absolutely is a connection between the 7th heaven and Hoshana Rabba, the Yom HaArava. Rabbeinu B'chai says in the Kara Kemach, Shiru Leiloikim Zamru Shemai, sing to the Rebbeinu Shalom, make music to his name, Soilu, extol L'roichev Ba'aravais, the one who rides the Arava. Some people ride a Toyota. Some people, Malin B'Kodesh, they ride a Lexus or an Infinity. Some people are in a higher Madrega, they drive a Tesla. And the Rebbeinu Shalom rides the Arava. Now the Arava sounds like my grandmother had an expression when somebody's very worn out. It's like a oiske shmeter Arava, Hoshana. Yeah, there's such a expression. So Arava doesn't sound like the best vehicle to drive. So what does it mean the Rebbeinu Shalom rides the Arava? So the Rabbeinu B'chai says, Umasha hizger lashain roichev aravos, lefisha hagalgal ha'elyon, the highest sphere, mikol shar hagalgalim hu aravos. V'hakadosh baruch hu elyon v'shalet olav. The Rebbeinu Shalom is supreme and dominates it. Ki lashain bika, right? We say soilu lo'ach ba'aravos bika. Bika implies Moira al memshala v'shaltanos. That implies dominion, power. Kihu yis'aleh chidesh hagalgalim. The Rebbeinu Shalom renews all the various orbs, and spheres. Ubaram yesh me'ayin. In other words, the Rebbeinu Shalom, we know that the Rambam says that the Rebbeinu Shalom runs the world through the various levels of Shemayim, through the constellations and the stars and the orbs. So in other words, he invests power in them that the Shemayim and the Mazalis actually have a hashpah and an influence on what transpires in this world. But Hashem creates them, And despite their great and awesome power, it's all from only God. They are all His servants and attendants. And therefore the Gemara says in Chagiga, the Rabbi Nechai quotes the Gemara in Chagiga that cites these 7 levels of the heavens. And this is what the Torah means. The rider is in control. So even though technically the Arava could say, that person over there, he should have a lot of money. That person over there should not have money. This person should have good Mazal, that person shouldn't have Atzlacha. And the Mazales, in fact, do exert hashpa on a person's success or lack thereof. Hashem rides the heavens. Rides means He controls it. To show the Rebbe Shem's control over the 7th heaven, who Aravos. Therefore, how do we know that God controls even the highest part of the Shamayim, which is the strongest part of the heavens? In other words, the strongest force in the universe, the strongest force of nature is the 7th heaven. Of any sphere in the world, the one that exerts the strongest hashba on this world is the 7th heaven. How do we know that the Rebbe Shem dominates even the 7th heaven? So Chazal and the Rebbe Shem instituted a 7th day of Yom Tif, and therefore the Chachmei HaEmes have revealed to us that on the 7th day of Sukkot, the mitzvah is take the Arava. And every Jew is obligated to take the Arava on this day. Aside from the Arava, which also alludes to this, because actually the Dal and Minim are also 7 that correspond to the 7 heavens. Shloisha Hadasa, Lulav Echad, Esrog Echad, Shloisha Hadasa, Shtei Aravos. And the 7th day of the Yom Tif is what? The 21st day of the year. What's the significance of the 21st day? Very important. Says Rabbeinu Bechaye, it's the seal of God's name. Why? Because His name is real Yud Kei Vav. The Hey already we used. We don't have to use the Hey. We already used the Hey the first time. So the second Hey is a repetition. So the Yud is 10 days, Hey is 5, Vav is 6, 21st day, and that's the Chasima of the Shem Hashem. So the reason why today is called the Chasima Gedola is because really God's name ends where? By the Vav. The Hey we already used. Therefore, and besides that, says Rabbeinu Bechaye, it's also the 26th day of creation, starting Chaf Hei Elul. So in a way, it's really the seal of Hashem's name. Therefore, today is called the great signature, Keneged the name of Hashem, and it's called Hoshana Rabba. So this day somehow shows where we take the Arava, and maybe the pshat is we pulverize it, indicating that Hashem is Meshaded Mareches Hashamayim. Hashem, so to speak, smashes the influence of the heavens on this day. And we're not going to have a Viloin day or a Rakia day, because once we know God controls even the highest heaven, then everything else goes without saying. Lo Yizua, for sure God rules over everything. So on this day, the Tachlis of Hoshana Rabbah is to say ultimately there are no influences on our life other than the Ribbon Shalom. And whatever Hashpa, the various Mazoles have, the Ribbon Shalom is Roichev, Shamayim, Be'ezrecha, or as the Tehillim says, Soilu la roichev ba'aravais. Yes, there's a heaven and it has ashpa, but the Rebbe Shem rides it and He guides it. And Rabbeinu Bechaye therefore says, Tzarech ha'adam she'is boinein, begoydel kaychayim, as one should contemplate the greatness of this day. Shu yom chaf aleph, it's the 21st day of the year and the 26th day of creation, and the day we finish bringing the 70 bulls. And all the various forces of the universe, which are the various forces of the nations of the world, sort of come back to their root. The Ramchal explains that there's an idea that by bringing the 70 parim, all the nations of the world are now subdued, tachas, mika amcha yisroel goy echad ba'aretz, they're all under our wings, and Esav and Yishmael, they disappear and they disintegrate on Hoshana Rabbah. By the way, the Shivim Umay Sa'olam, they become our attendants. So, we're going to need gardeners and painters and whatever, all the various responsibilities. So that's the Shivim Umay Sa'olam. And Esav and Yishmael, they disappear, they dissipate. Lo asarid lebeis Esav, the Navi says there won't be any remnants of Edom, and Legabe Yishmael, the Zayar says they also fall off the face of the map. And the Shivan Umayis come tachas kinafenu. But this is all through the avoida of the Arava. What is the Arava? The Arava represents the seventh heaven. And perhaps by shattering and smashing the Arava, we're saying that whatever power and investiture the Rebbe Shalom put into it, nevertheless, the Rebbe Shalom controls it, and it does not influence us without the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that is a great tachlis of the Yom Tov of Sukkot, and especially Hoshana Rabba, where all the forces, so to speak, we acknowledge that they're completely subdued, whether they're the forces of heaven, whether the forces of the Umayis HaOlam. Everything Rabbeinu B'chai says, Kol koichos asidin sheyashuvu l'sibasam harishayna. Okay. So I thought that this might work together with a very beautiful idea that's offered by the Talmidei Hagra, most notably the Nachlas David Reb David Tevel, who's from the Talmidei Hagoin, and he brings on the famous din we all know that a sukkah shechamasa meruba mitzilasa is pasul, that a sukkah is psula, that has more sun than shade is pasul. Why is it pasul? Well, it's pasul because the sukkah is out the schach. However, says the Nachlas David, there's another inyan over here, and there's a deeper message. And that is, of all the celestial spheres, the strongest sphere, of course, is the Chama. The sun is the most powerful one. Maybe it's not the biggest, but certainly the Shemesh is the melech of all the spheres, at least to the human eye, and therefore the Rebbe Shalom wants it to be that way. So, of all the mazalos, the sun is the strongest and exerts the most influence on, let's say, the outcome of a person's chayim. But the inyan of the sukkah is to acknowledge that ultimately we are only under tzila de mehemenusa, only under the shade of Hashem. We are not influenced by the sun. So the whole tachlis of the sukkah, as specifically Hoshana Rabba is to recognize that all the forces of nature don't influence us. We're not subject to them. They don't control our lives. It's only us and the Rebbeinu Shalom. So sukkah, shechamasa, meruba mitzilasa, defeats the whole message of the sukkah, which is we're only under the guidance and protection and hashgacha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We are not influenced by the mazalis of Shamayim, and therefore sukkah shechamasa meruba mitzilasa psula. In fact, I'm remembering now, I just saw in the Sefer Seder Hayom of Rav Moshe ben Machir from the Talmidei Arizal. By the way, he's the author of the tefillah that you may have heard of called Moida Ani Lefanecha Melech Chai V'Kayam Shechazarta Bi Nishmasi B'Chemla Kama Rabba Emunasecha. Yeah, that was written by the Seder Hayom. And he writes, what is unique about the Daled Minim, the Lulav, the Esrog, the Hadassim, and the Aravis, and that is they are the only plants that have no go-between and no intermediary between them and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's only the Rebbeinu Shalom is mashgiach over them directly, so to speak, just like Klal Yisrael. So again, we see that a very dominant theme on the Yom Tov of Sukkot is that we are not influenced by any of the Ma'arechas HaShamayim, by any of the Mazolos, by any of the Koichos of Teva, of nature, but instead we are directly under the protection of Hashem. The sun doesn't influence us. The sukkah that's Chamasa Meruba Mitzilasa is Psula. And that's the reason why on the seventh day, the Yom HaArava, the Arava represents Hashem dominates even the highest of heavens. Hoshana Rabba, then, perhaps we understand why it's Keneged Avraham Avinu. If you remember, there was a man by the name of Avraham. There's a Chumash, this shul has Chumashim. Sorry, thank you. There's a man by the name of Abraham. And, thank you very much. Avraham did not have any children. And it was not looking good for him. You know, the prognostication for Avraham was not looking good. And ultimately, Hashem had to come to Avraham, and Hashem told Avraham, look, you're going to have a kid. And Avraham said, it's impossible. I look in the stars, I look in the Mazal, and the Mazal say very clearly, Avram is not going to have a kid. And what did the Rivan Shalom tell Avraham? Hashem said the following words, Tsei meyitztagninos shalcha. Tsei. Go out of your astrological signs. Right? The pasuk says in Parak Tes Vav, pasuk Hey. Pasuk says, Vayoytze oisei hachutza, vayomer haba no hashamayim asvar kachomim tuchal esvarisam, vayomer koi yazarecha. Vayoytze oisei hachutza. Says Rashi, Lefi pshutoi hoitzioi me'ahaloi lechutz lirois hakoichavim. Ulefi midrashay amar loi tzei mitztagnina shalcha. Sher isa b'mazolo she'encha asa l'hamed ben Avraham ein loy ben, aval Avraham yesh loy ben. V'chein Sarai loy teled, aval Sarah teled. So there is an idea that Avraham Avinu looked at the Mazalos, and in the Mazalos it said he will not have any children. After all, Avraham Avinu, he was an old man. He's 100 years old. Avraham Avinu, Chazal say, was toichein ve'enoi poilet. He did not have the physical ability. Sarah Imenu was not an akara. She wasn't Akara. The Gemara in Yevamah says she was an islandess. She had no rechem. So, nobody's helping these people. They went to Bnei Olam and they said, lots of luck. They went to a time and they said, have a nice day. We don't, nothing we could do. So, it was not physically possible. The Mazaloi said Avram Avinu would not have a child. And Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, in his writings, explains very interestingly the concept of Ein Mazal Yisroel. What does Ein Mazal Yisroel mean? There is no such thing as Mazal for Klal Yisrael, in that when the Rebbe Shem created the world, there is no Mazal that is Keneged Klal Yisrael. The Mazalos are Keneged Klal Yisrael. The Mazalos say we cannot exist. The only way a Jew can exist if he rises up above the Mazalos and he connects to the Torah. But once he wants to live in a physical, natural world, the natural world is completely antithetical to his existence. And the Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Chaver explains that when Avram Avinu was thrown into Or Kasdim, basically that ended the life of this gentleman, Avraham, and Hashem recreated Avraham as an entity that is unaffected by the Mazalis. That when Klal Yisrael, the descendants of Avram, want to live a natural life, the Rebbe Shem says you want to live a natural life, this world and Teva is antithetical to Klal Yisrael. In other words, if Klal Yisrael wants to live a natural life, the Rebbe Shem says there could be a pandemic in this world and it's going to affect you more than anybody else. Because there is no nature for Klal Yisrael. This world and Klal Yisrael, they don't go together. They don't shtim. They don't fit. It is impossible for a Jew to live in the Olam HaTeva. The Olam HaTeva says, look in the stars, it says Klal Yisrael should be wiped off and destroyed and not existent. The only way we exist is Vayoytze Oisei Hachutza Lemala from the Shemesh and the Yareach and the Koichavim and the Mazalos and all the Rakia and even above the Arava, and the way we exist is Ein Chadash Tachas Hashemesh Aval Lamala Me Hashemesh. We can only exist Lamala Me Hashemesh. Ein Mazal Yisrael doesn't mean we don't have Mazal. It means the Mazal of Klal Yisrael is we should Lahashmid Laroi Guliabed. We can only exist by being Mizdabek Ta'akadosh Baruch Hu. If we're not Mizdabek Ta'akadosh Baruch Hu, we have no way, we have no form of existence. But Avraham Avinu showed the world that even though in Mazal Yisrael, but we can exist when we rise up Lamala Meha Mazalis. Vayoytze Oisei Achutza. So to speak, Hashem told Avraham, say. Where else in Chazal do we find an expression where the Rebbe Shem tells Klal Yisrael, it's say? We find it in two places. Say me'etztagnina shalcha, and say midiras keva, ve'yelech lediras arai. We find the same expression of tsei by the sukkah. It's interesting. We all know that sukkah, which is Gematria 91. Gematria Tsei are the two names of Hashem. Right? That's like the foundational drush on Sukkah, in the Cheshek Shloim in the beginning of Masechta, that Sukkah is the tziruf of the two Shemos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tsei, that's the Sukkah. The Sukkah is in the protection of Shemos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What is the concept of Tsei Midiras Keva? Hashem says this world is a world where Teva is Koiveya, the order of operations, the way things work in this world, the way nature progresses. And Hashem tells us the message of the Sukkah is Tsei Midiras Keva. Leave the Hanhaga HaKavua. Leave the established rules of this world. You're not part of that. You're not subject to that. You don't live governed by the natural order of nature. Instead, we live a supernatural existence. A Jew lives a supernatural existence. When a Jew wants to be subject to nature, we are totally not only unsuccessful, we cannot have any chiyus, we have no life. And that is why the Maral explains that in the history of the Jewish people, either we're the most successful, the most fortunate, the most happy, or we're the most unfortunate, and we have no ability to thrive and exist. Those are the two modes of Jewish life. Either we're lamala mehakoichavim, and we're the most successful of all the nations, or we're under threat. Lahashmed la'ar goliabe. These are the two options, because ein mazal yisroel. Ein mazal yisroel means we cannot live b'derech hateva. If we cling to what is lamala min hateva, then we rise up lamala mehakoichavim, lamala mehamazolos, and the Rebbeinu Shalom is roichev ba'aravos, and the Rebbeinu Shalom is roichev shamayim be'ezracha. And if we say we want to live in this physical world, we're in big trouble and we're in hot water, we can't continue. That's why Avraham Avinu and Sarah created a Klal Yisrael in a manner in which naturally they cannot exist. So that perhaps is the connection between Hoshana Rabba and Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu represents the Indian of Tsei Midiras Keva v'shav b'diras arai. Avraham Avinu was told Tsei me'etz tagnina shalcha, leave the hanhaga hakavua, because Avraham Avinu has no mazal. Avraham Avinu has no way to exist. B'derech hateva, all the mazalos are menaged any children to Avraham and Sarah, and yet Avraham and Sarah were successful in creating the entire entity of Klal Yisrael. So Hoshana Rabba is after 7 days of Sukkot, where we sit tachas the tzel v'shechamasa meruba mitzilasa is psula, and on Hoshana we break the Arava, indicating the Rebbe Shalom Zroicha b'shamayim be'ezracha. This is the day of Avraham Avinu, the day that represents Tsei me'etz tagninos shalcha. So that's what I got for you in the first part of the Shiur, and I want to share with you very briefly one other idea. How's that?
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.